It's a great pleasure to be with you all tonight, and I'm happy to take any of your questions or comments on other things we got to fix and so forth. Ross, go ahead.
Steve, you think some of the leading Republicans running for president, do they actually believe in liberty and are stymied by the system, or do they not even believe in it?
It would be my opinion, we could take any candidate, that they do not. That this is sort of just a gig. I mean, just take Scott Walker, who, started running for office when he was in his 20s and just kept running and kept moving different places, whatever he had to do. And he's never worked in the private sector, and he hasn't quite figured out immigration, for example. So how do you run for president? I mean, it's the president of the United States of America. It's not even like the president of Estonia. I'm not making fun of Estonia or Peru. This is the biggest country with the biggest economy, and a lot of the world rides on our shoulders. They use our currency around the world. It's not a joke. So get it straight. And so he's already switched his opinion several times in the campaign on immigration. Rather than, it's pretty easy, folks. Listen, we don't have immigration like we did years ago. There's no more Ellis Island. A guy named Joe is not coming over, and a guy's putting his arm around saying, I vouch for this guy. I know you checked him with tuberculosis. We don't have a social welfare state. He's coming with me. I will take care of him. It's on me. That's not happening. Hasn't happened in 50, 100 years. And so we can't assimilate the people who are coming into the American culture. We're getting overrun. So we can't help them, and we can't help us. Have anybody been to Guatemala? Raise your hand if you've been to Guatemala. It's a basket case. It's not a big country. I love the people in Guatemala. I've been down to Guatemala. I was the only elected official from Bill Clinton to me to go to Guatemala to see what was going on down there. Gosh darn it, we could help them a lot more than by having their people come here. It's not that hard, except we got to focus on the Middle East. Right? We got to talk about the Middle East, the two-state solution. Two-state solution. Are you joking? So no, I think the answer is no. I think that this is a game, and they've got it figured out. And by the way, the press has a kind of, listen, Marco Rubio can make a speech, and 4 guys on Fox News, I happen to be working, I watched it live. 4 guys are watching Marco Rubio's speech. I'm not trying to make fun of people individual at all. He's probably a fine guy. He's got a beautiful wife, 4 kids. It was the worst speech I ever heard. And 4 guys on Fox News, including Britt Hume, whom I kind of respect, was like, that was wonderful. I'm like, well, what problem did he solve? He didn't mention the national debt. I mean, I can give the speech. I had a tougher upbringing than he did. Let me tell you, you start tying your doors together before you go to sleep so your brothers don't come in and kill you. That's tough. That's me. My older brothers spent like 12, 13 years locked up. I got a sister who's been in a group home with schizophrenia. My brother died of AIDS. I mean, you want to talk tough? I had tough. That's not why you should elect me president. I mean, it's got nothing to do with it. And so I don't get it. It's fine at the mayor level and whatever. Oh, this blah, blah, blah. You came from this neighborhood. Whatever. But it's too serious now. Go ahead. You had some other questions. Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am. Linda.
You hit a nerve when you talked about Jeb Bush. I'm sure he's a fine man. At the Council on World Affairs, did you go to any of those? This was my first year in 45 years of living in Boulder that I went to the Council on World Affairs because they did bring in a little bit more of a diverse paneling setup. Anyway, one of the panels was on Obamacare. And I got up and asked a very probing question. The doctor on the panel did not satisfy me. He did not really give the accurate information he should have. So I chased him down after. Well, I didn't chase him down. I found him afterwards, and he was out there in the foyer at the Glenn Miller Ballroom, and he was talking with a woman, and she was opining, all the doctors, my father was a surgeon, and the doctors get paid too much, all the medicine should be free, and the two of them were just going on and on, a love fest there, a liberal love fest. Yeah. Anyway, I finally, when she took a breath, I jumped in there and I asked some pertinent questions. Well, they got back to the debt. And do you know who they blamed? I said, how are we going to do what you are proposing when we are going on $18.5 trillion in debt? Oh, well, that doesn't matter. And I said, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, do we run our personal finances like that? But what they came at me with, it just blew me away. Shouldn't have. But the old mantra. That's not Obama's debt. That was Bush. And they fought me tooth and nail, and I came back with solid facts. I left with my head spinning. Those people are still talking and declaring that the $18.5 trillion has nothing to do with Obama. It is Bush's debt.
Yeah, well,
debt.
It is Bush's debt.
And so, my question is, how do you combat or how do you come against that kind of absolute unreality?
Well, you're talking about people who don't live in any reality at all. And there are people like that. Those people, I don't think people are going to change their mind. I wouldn't spend a lot of time trying to change their mind because they're not going to change their mind. I mean,
Bush runs, he will spend his entire time defending that, and he will not win.
Well, no, I don't know. I'm not a political procrastinator about who will win the race, but it's the other. Listen, I'm really here to talk about the other people, the ones who are driving 50 miles to work, the ones that were making 80 grand for their family and now are making 60. I mean, real wages. I mean, there are points to be made that Republicans should make. The average real wage in America, for the first time over any 14-year period in the history of America, is down. Why? It's never in the papers. Anybody really want to know why? It's called Communist China. It's called the World Trade Organization. We allowed Communist China into the World Trade Organization, and we buy stuff, not this Hickey Freeman suit, not this Made in America shirt, not the All-American Clothing Company jeans, not the boots made in America. Everything I got, I don't know about the underwear, everything I got is basically made in America. And when I walk into a store, I ask them, where's the Made in America section? I should make a film of just the reaction of people's faces when I say, in any store I go into, furniture store, where's the American made section? Because they know intuitively there should be a Made in America section. Like the average American says, yeah, there should be one. I just don't think there's one in my store, right? And I only do that. Sofas. We bought a sofa last year. We went through heck to try to buy one made in America to get one that fit our house and so forth. But that's really the problem with wages. Why do no Republicans talk about it? Watch the movie. Indirectly, that's where people get their money from. Large corporations have landed over in communist China, not to serve the communist China market, but to send cheap stuff back to America. We've hollowed out our manufacturing. And the real people, the ones I care about, listen, I'm going to be fine, it looks like. Okay? I'm going to be fine. And most people are going to be fine. But a lot of Americans are going to sleep at night, not being able to sleep. They can't do what they want. They're not going to, the great theory of free trade is we'd all be retrained to be computer programmers. Well, it ain't happening. I hate to tell you, as a Republican, it ain't happening. We are in deep trouble. And by the way, you want to take out communist China without a war? You better start thinking about changing the trade relationships now, because their debt over the last 5 years has rallied like 54%. Their private debt to GDP, one of the highest increases over any 5-year period. And their private debt to GDP absolutely is like 228%. They are going to collapse over this. And we should be there to help them collapse over that. Communist China is not our friend. They are our enemy. And by the way, just if you see Scott Walker, let him know, or any of these other people running for president, that to start off talking about foreign policy, you better get it straight. There are at least 6 countries organized against America to bring us down. That's Communist China, North Korea, their crazy nephew, Syria, Iran, obviously, Russia, Venezuela. When North Korea sends a missile up, there's a guy from Iran standing right there. There's a guy from Russia standing right there. They know each by themselves they cannot bring America down. But all together they think they can. So they are totally united. And by the way, where have you ever heard someone say this? It's not on TV tonight. The Middle East is on TV tonight. Sorry, I keep looking at you there when I say that. But the Middle East is on TV tonight. That's what's on TV tonight. There's a vested interest in only talking about the Middle East. So, anyway, I'm sorry. You had a question, sir.
Yeah, I like a lot of things you guys say, but you just disappointed me. Why are you against laissez-faire and free trade?
Hey, listen, free trade. I grew up. I'm an economics major. Free trade with free countries works out fine. Us in Canada, got no real problem. Maybe they lose some lumber, we gain some oil.
But you watched Free Choose.
I did. I watched in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's a tiny little country.
But free trade with free countries is limited trade. Free trade with all countries is laissez-faire.
Yeah. What has been the result? What's been the result of giving communist China a 40% discount on everything they do with them?
That's interference, though. We haven't had a laissez-faire situation.
How can we have a free trade situation with a communist country? By the way, take another example of Marco Rubio, for example. Hates what's happening with Cuba, right, in foreign policy, opening up Cuba and so forth. I agree with him. Every one of these people will mention communist China as like, if we just trade with them long enough, they'll become liberal and they'll become more, liberal in a classic sense. They'll become more free trading and more democracy and so forth. There's no example in the history of the world of that happening. And I would just tell you, for national defense purposes, what they are building up. Do you know what? Do people know the hypersonic missile they just developed? Do people know about it? They are stealing U.S. technology. All Barack Obama has done so far is charge 5 individuals in China with espionage. 4 of them are like generals. They're not coming for trial in America, just so you know. They're just not showing up. The other guy, I don't know who he is. So it hasn't worked out well. And for national, unless you believe that they're really in it for peaceful purposes. In my opinion, the evidence is already in. Communist China is trying to become the world superpower. So if anybody here wants to live under what was like Rome was like, try communist China, where 435 people decide exactly whether you're going to live or die.
Well, 435 people here decide that.
No, they do not yet. No, they do not. It's not even close. It's not good, but it's not even close. Literally, people disappear they beat blind people in communist China.
I understand.
There's a blind man who tried to get out. They beat him senseless.
People here. So I didn't mean to hijack Russ's question, but all of Reagan's reforms, as far as trading with communist countries, really did break down that wall.
The big problem with Reagan was the Plaza Accords had to do with Japan. You remember Japan bought Pebble Beach. Everybody in America went crazy. Oh my gosh. I had no problem with that. Why? The Japanese currency floats freely, right? The Chinese currency does not. They keep it under control. Yet every single year under Bush and Obama, we decide that they're not currency manipulators. How could they not be currency manipulators when the currency does not trade freely? So Reagan at the Plaza Hotel in New York in 1987 told the Japanese government, hey, listen, here's the deal. You're going to build stuff for the American market in America with American workers. We're not going to have a trade deficit with you anymore. And guess what? They basically did. And you haven't heard another story about that since 87. But I don't know the communist country that Reagan was involved in that took them to... maybe I missed that.
I just gave you an example in Europe, but the populism is...
What was the example in Europe?
The populism works really well, so you can stick with that.
No, but what was the example in Europe?
By freely trading with the economies of scale in the Eastern Bloc, we were very much able to influence the economies and the culture of those countries.
That's not what happened.
No, I wouldn't.
That's never going to happen in China either.
No, it's not. That's not. I'm sorry.
In China. Never going to
we could just respectfully disagree on that. But my major point would simply be this: when it comes to communist China, their military spending is going up by 20% per year, and they are building things generally with our stolen technology. Our F-35 fighter, they have a new fighter that looks exactly like it, right? So we are allowing them to take over slowly but surely as the world superpower, and because our financial situation is so bad, that's how these things change. That's how England changed to America over England's financial situation after World War II. So listen, if you got bananas and I got Intel chips, I'll be trading with you all day long, as long as you're going to keep making more bananas. Because you're going to make a lot more bananas.
Bananas in a country that you don't agree with as far as the politics go.
Well, it's not just
going to trade with me.
No, it's not just agree with. It's a mortal threat to America's future.
So you would cut off all trade with China.
I don't say we'd have to cut off all trade with China, but we need to change.
Well, what would
we could, by the way.
Because if they're an evil, storming world power, isn't it all or nothing?
Well, no, listen. For example, they're recent dumping of steel into the U.S. market, right? Because they built so much steel. They have no idea what to do with it. They got 70 million homes that nobody lives in, right? So they built up this private debt market, and they've got to shove all their looming unemployment to America. Wouldn't it be a better foreign policy before we go down 6 more years down the road? Wouldn't it be better for Communist China to have to deal with their problems themselves? They got lots of boys, few girls, lots of young people, and there'd be lots of riots when this thing collapses. Shouldn't we help it along? Wouldn't that be a better way for Communist China to maybe make it?
What's that? What kind of phone do you have?
iPhone?
You have an iPhone?
Yeah.
So why? I mean,
because I can't find one. No. Because I can't find one made in America.
So you're not willing to live what you're saying should be done.
For the most part, I try to live and buy only things made in America. If I can't, I go to Canada. If I can't, after that, I'm seriously. I go to England and so forth. If I can't find it, I can't find a phone.
Compromise that stated value.
Yes,
for convenience.
That's right. At some point, you do. Yes.
Do we have any other questions?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're keeping you late. I'm sorry.
You're talking about made.
Go ahead.
You're talking about made in America.
Yeah.
You've talked about maintaining budget control. So you're talking about cities, states, and the county and the country. But what about personal budget control? For example, I don't know what kind of car you own, but over the last 12 years or so, I've owned Japanese cars and Korean cars. Only for several reasons. They cost less, you get better quality, longer warranties, and so on and so forth. Now, I've made an economic decision based upon my budget to buy cars that are not built by union members, and I'll never drive one that's built by a union member.
And I drive 3 cars made in America. A Ford Expedition, a Giant, the biggest passenger extended length. I drive a Ford F-250 pickup truck, and I drive a Nissan made in Mississippi with tires with a B on them, made in Birmingham, Alabama, because I thought the Ford Econo and the Chevy Express were terrible, and I got 6 kids, and everybody keeps visiting me. I need like 12 seats. So anyway, then Ford came up with a new Transit, which I'd like to buy, but I'm only 2 years into mine. So I try, and my tractor's made in America and so forth. But not everything. Like I said, not everything can be. But you've made your personal decision, right? I just wish more people. By the way, people, if they were more aware of this, would make more personal decisions. It wouldn't take much for people personally to be making more decisions about buying stuff made in America. If you drive the country and you see the hollowed out manufacturing buildings, or if you watch the movie, which it wasn't hard to find these buildings driving down roads. It's shocking. And it's shocking to see how people live. I mean, listen, where we live in this Front Range is utopia of America. So if you don't leave and get in a car and you just fly to New York City and stay in a hotel, if you fly somewhere to San Francisco, you think everything's okay. Right now, it's like 67 or 72% of Americans think we're on the wrong track. And we are. It's never 72%. 60% of Americans want a third party. It's never been that high. 5% of Americans have high confidence in the government. It's never been that low. 7% of Americans want more illegal immigration. It's never been that low. The average person is so frustrated. It's like a powder keg about to break here in the whole country. What's happening in Baltimore today is something that's totally out of control. But believe me, if you travel and just visit with regular folks that don't live on the Front Range, right, from Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, people are really unhappy about the state of this country and the leadership of this country and what they expect out of this country versus what they're getting in the future, number one, for their children. Most people don't think, it's the first time in history that most people think that the next generation won't have it as good as this generation. That's a sad thing for adults, for people my age who have kids. I'm sorry, Mike.
No,
go ahead.
There's one question over there, and then I might take the last one unless there's somebody else with a question. Okay.
Tim had one too. I'm sorry.
Make it quick.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I do want to say, first of all, I'm really sorry that I cut you off.
No, anybody can cut me off. Believe me, I had a riot one time at a city council meeting. A real riot where 150 firemen came to a turnstile to try to beat me up. I had to jump out the window or go fight with them.
And I absolutely agree with everything that you just said. I mean, you nail on the head with the fact that the voting public cannot empathize with the government or anything like the large spending that the federal government's doing and all these other things. Particularly, I am a registered Democrat. I'm a moderate Democrat. I'm not a liberal Democrat, but I'm here just kind of observing this whole situation. So I'm sorry I perked up a little bit earlier.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
I think that this is a great thing. I mean, I really do. I think that this is the tread of the Constitution right here. If only I don't disagree with it, it at least has that value. So, all I want to ask of everybody is that how many of you are registered Republican? Please raise your hand. So with that, I mean, I'm glad there was as many non-raised hands as there were. So
yeah, I'm sure there's some constitutional party, libertarian.
I mean, I really am. I'm rooting for a third party. I want a third party, but I'm coming from the left on a way.
But I mean, the issues I talked about, term limits. I mean, there's issues that lots of people agree upon, and that listen, the John F. Kennedy Democrat, which is sort of what I guess in some ways I am, in many respects. They have nowhere to go. There are people with nowhere to go. And so we're left with this least best choice in these elections. Think about it. Independents have rallied up to 20% of the vote sometimes, and then 4 days before the election, they go back to 6 because they can't cross the chasm.
Okay, so my other question is that how do you feel about the TPP? Because none of that has been discussed here.
The TPP. The Trans-Pacific
Partnership that's been totally in the news, not in the news at the same time. I mean, depending on your news source, this
it's hard. I would say it's very hard to get a hold of that TPP because
it's been a very private thing.
Yeah, I don't even know what's going on.
I mean, I voted for Obama twice personally. I'm not going to lie with that, but this has been the forefront of the White House's agenda with the trade partnership with Europe and the Eurasian continents and.
Nobody knows what's in it because it's a 5,000 page.
I know. I don't know. I actually don't know what's in it.
I have a lot of parts. So, and then the third part is how does everybody feel about Rand Paul? That's it. That's all I got to say. That's all because I just want to know.
What do you think about Rand Paul?
Listen, I just don't think he certainly doesn't understand national defense, in my opinion. Not that, we got to be involved in, I'm not a neocon or anything like that, but we're just not going to have a Coast Guard. And so, again, we just don't need famous people's sons right now. We just don't need, it's just like what we're left with. It seems to be sad. Like, what the heck are we really doing? I mean, where I come from, they wouldn't change the election process for me to run for 2 offices at once. It just seems kind of phony baloney. So no, I'm not a big Rand or Ron. Although I tell you what, this thing about I could go on about the Federal Reserve for an hour, but I'm not going to. We're going to close the show. I'll just stop. But this Federal Reserve, it's
Brian, sorry, we're going to have to go on.
Go to Tim.
Please stay after and talk.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Individually, we'll go here and we'll.
By the way, this is so great for me. I just love doing this. I love the arguments. I love everything. Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
I just want everybody to hear.
I wish I could do this every day. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go to Tim first for a second. Oh no, go. I'm sorry. Go to you, Paul.
No worries.
I'm sorry.
My name's Kenny.
Oh, Kenny.
Paul. Kenny, but that's fine. I have a degree in economics, and so try to cohesively bring this all together. I think, is your problem with China only that they are so, they're kind of, I feel like they're sort of communist. They were very communist, and then they're realizing that they're, hey, we can succeed a whole lot better if we can compete, and they're sort of opening up a little bit to the. They're nothing like we are, and I get that. But on some level, they're very communist. I get that. I'm not trying to defend China. I get that, but on some level, they are, trying to open up and compete in a capitalistic world, if you will, more than they used to. Correct? I mean. They certainly trade with us, and they, on all of that. And the more that they do that, the more that they succeed, right? And so, on some level, I feel like it's not so much that we are failing; it's that there are other countries that are figuring it out, and they're getting their collective they're getting their poop together. They're fit, like, I mean, the next, okay, so China has the cheap labor, and so we move things over to China because we can make some deals with China, and the corporations go over there. Now that the labor is getting more expensive over there because they're just developing so quickly and so well, now where's the next? It's India. Now we're going to move to India. And India's kind of getting their stuff together. They're figuring it out.
Large and middle class.
Right. They've got the population. And then where's it going after that? I mean, we've got Bangladesh is happening. And then you know where cheapest labor in the world is? It's in Africa, but they haven't figured out how to get a good electrical grid together, and they still can't figure out so it's too dangerous to go there. But you know what? In 20 years, you know where we'll all be going? To Africa, because that's where the cheapest labor is. As long as they figure out how to get their infrastructure together, we have the technology to communicate. We didn't used to have that. And I feel like that's what's happened. It's a worldwide giant. We got the technology to communicate, and places that can get their stuff together, and make it at least possible to trade with and do business with. You don't do business with Angola. Why? Because your factory might just be taken over by warlords and it's a mess.
But Communist China does business with Angola.
Well,
no, they do.
No, Communist China's trying to...
all over Africa.
If I heard a question in there, it was, what would be the change in China?
Yeah. How about just this, though, for all the free traders out there? How about they let their currency float freely?
I agree.
That would be a 20% cost minimum increase for them to trade with us. And how about taking off all the tariffs that go their way, which is about 25% for anything we try to sell them? How about we get a 40% increase overnight in their cost structure so we can see some riots in their country? I mean, that's what would need. That's what would need to happen. See, Lily, the problem is this. They own the liquor store, and we're like the drunk, right? They got to keep buying all this. They got to keep buying our debt. They got to keep their currency down. They got all these young people that are about to riot. But I would disagree with you, and I think that we're heading toward a real confrontation with Communist China. What they're doing militarily, and just their build out. When they start launching aircraft carriers, and they got nuclear submarines that now can go out and go all the way to take out America, and their hypersonic missiles, they're not developing the way Japan developed. It's not happening that way. It's a one-off. If it was just Japan, well, that'd be like fine. It's not great, but it's okay. And then we'd have a Plaza Accord with Communist China and say, hey, if you're going to build stuff for the American market, you're going to build it in America.
So I continue that.
So yes, I'm sorry.
Let's go to Bob and then here, and then we got it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Steve, I really appreciate your wisdom and the input and that last analysis on the macro level to fix things. On a micro level, what can we do to kind of prepare or fix or try and avoid Armageddon? Could we write Jared Polis a nice letter to have him do something? Buy gold or buy ammo? I mean, what would you suggest at our level?
Ammo's always good. No, I do think there's one. If I really on a micro basis, what could you do every day? I think about this trade relationship. I think he really could, and I do this, by the way. My wife knows. And again, my phone has to come from Communist China. I'll give you an example. I was buying some fencing. I was looking at this beautiful fencing, and it was a company in Wisconsin, and it was like steel, but it looked dark green. I said, "This is really cool." So I called the lady on the phone. We had a great conversation. Told a little bit about myself, and blah 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 blah. I sent her a copy of my movie. She calls me back. I don't think you can really buy this stuff from me. I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, all our companies in Wisconsin, just me and my husband, like 3 other people, we make everything in Communist China." She didn't say Communist China. I always say Communist China. I was just shocked because I hadn't even asked, because the stuff's heavy. It's going to be shipped all the way to Wisconsin, then all the way to my house. It seemed to be ludicrous, right? That's the cost differential. So you can always just ask and try. I mean, your personal exemption is perfectly fine. If you've made a decision, I ain't doing this. And I think that's great, by the way, because you got a code to live by. I try to live by my code, and I slip up sometimes, and I say, well, I can't get this computer made. A TV set, I can't get one made. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. And by the way, in all seriousness, they do make underwear made in America. It was like $20 a pair. I got to tell you, I couldn't do it. Anyway, So that everybody does have their limit, but on a reasonable basis, you can find lots of stuff made in America if you just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to buy something made in America. Especially, by the way, automobile tires are really easy. Just make sure they have a B on them. There's a code. Go look it up when you get home. There's a code for every tire where it's made. You look on the side of it. B is Birmingham. That's where my Michelins are made. The French maker, but they're made in America. Fine. You know?
What's the idea behind that? Buying American?
Jobs. If you all came with me on this trip around America, the couple that I took, and you saw how many people were suffering and how many people's lifestyles had changed, you probably do the same thing. If you don't, you probably don't. Listen, for a long time until 2000, I never really thought about this. You know, I thought I'm a classically trained economics major from Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine. And so, you know, the Ricardo, we can go through all the theories and so forth. But when you look at how America became a world superpower and what industries it actually protected up till 1971, it's the same thing England did with its colonies while they were the world superpower. Now we've turned it over. It's the same thing Communist China is doing today. They are protecting certain industries that you can't get into in their country.
Wait, are you using former superpowers history to say we should follow it?
No, I'm just saying that's what they did to build up certain industries. I'm not even saying that.
Successful was it?
It was very, well. It was for England. It was extraordinarily successful for a lot of years. You know, I'm not advising that.
Well,
listen,
in 1850 they went full free trade, and that's when their big boom happened. Was under pure free trade.
No, I don't.
When they got rid of all of their tariffs, that's when they boomed.
Yeah,
1850 was when they were full free trade, and they had 50 years of absolute prosperity.
They had lots of colonies for a long period of time. But what I'm saying is, it really just gets back to this one issue of Communist China, which you guys disagree upon, and I totally disagree with you. I just totally disagree, because I think you're going to wake up, and this again gets back to this one case gets back to national security implications. I think people are going to wake up in about 6 or 7 years and go, the whole papers. You remember that Steve Laffey said this when all these newspapers on the cover and all the stories switch, and it's all about aircraft carriers and missiles and what's going on near Guam and all this stuff that's going on. If we continued on this track, it's going to be a great risk for the American public, and you're going to have a higher defense bill than you need to have if you could shake them up now.
I see no greater risk to the American public than its own government. Flat out. Anything that China can do, we can do better to ourselves first. We're destroying this country from the inside out. China is the least of our worries.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a word. I wouldn't say the least, but it's not the most. But it's not the least. That's for sure. It's a big word. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I've been calling on you, Tim, for 20 minutes.
Last one.
Go ahead. Last question. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to change the topic to what I think is the number one issue, which is the deficit. And I probably started following this 35 years ago. Yeah. Warms my heart to hear somebody be passionate about it tonight. But I got to say, people were much more passionate about this back when I started paying attention to it than they are now. So here's the question for you. What's it going to take at a national level for us to get to the point that Cranston got to, where they're willing to take the cod liver oil? Yeah, they're willing to hate you and still elect you.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. The question is, when is America going to get to Cranston, Rhode Island, and people are going to say, yeah, we'll elect a guy that says this is going to be terrible. You're not going to like it. No one's going to like anything I'm going to do. Vote for me, and they actually do. We could be pretty close, I think. Listen, I come to these meetings and I see a thirst for someone to tell them the truth, And I think you guys know. I mean, ladies know. You're going to read the paper tomorrow. It won't be the truth. Like someone's just going to make some stuff up, and someone's going to say, no, I didn't really mean that, and so forth. And by the way, no one running for president today will actually lay out that we are in deep trouble. That should be the message. Someone should run for president and say, listen, I just want to be honest with you. We are in deep trouble. Like this great republic has 435 congressmen, 100 senators, 17 members of the Federal Reserve, and the risk-reward situation that they have put us in, or we have allowed them to put this in, is to risk the whole shooting match, to risk the whole republic. That's where we stand today. That we've allowed the $4.3 trillion balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, $1.3 trillion of student debt for people who don't know how to find jobs. They can't even go bankrupt to get out of it for the most part. $18 trillion spent on what? Hey, listen, if all the roads driving here on that RV I took, if all the roads were paved and there was Wi-Fi everywhere in the country and there was like buildings that weren't burning, tipping over as I drove through, I'd still be against it, right? But at least we'd have something for it. We got nothing. I mean, listen, I'll give you one last statistic. There were 6 large banks in 2008 had 35% of the assets of the American people. Today, those same 6 banks, almost all whose stocks should have went to zero, almost all their CEOs should have been fired. Those same 6 banks have 65% of the assets of the American people. Yet they're all solvent and passing those stress tests. Another thing you should not believe. Because when you know what hits the fan, by the way, it's going to be terrible. And by the way, do you know how many people know how many new banks have been started since 2008? How many community banks in America? How many savings and loans? 1. Republicans and Democrats have figured out a way to take the small banker out. 1 bank, it's in like Pennsylvania, it's an Amish bank, it's got a buggy thing you can drive through. I'm not joking. I wish I was joking. 1 bank has been started because no one can do the regulation. No one with $400 million of assets can fill out the forms. When I was at Morgan Keegan in 1999, remember the year 2000 problem? We would overcome at $500 million in revenue how much money we had to spend, according to the federal regulators, for a problem that didn't exist. Remember the lights went on in Ukraine or whatever that in the middle of the night, and countries that didn't do anything were all fine, and we had spent millions of dollars. It's that to the nth degree with banks. So power by the way, is so concentrated in some of these areas, and so much power that people have, I'll leave you this one last thought. People are checking out. We need to have them not check out before it really is too late. And I thank you for your time. It's been great. I love the conversation. Thank you. God bless.